We'll get into the Xfinities and then on into Pocono for tomorrow. But Grant Effinger, number one, Stuart Firestone, I got that name wrong, Brett Moffitt, Ben Rose, Matt Crafton, Johnny Sauter, and Austin Hill, and Todd Gillihan, and Harrison Burton round out your top nine. Obviously, Ford is pretty dominating there in the top five, as well as one and two and three are Chevy. But Ford seems to have found their way in the Truck Series this year.
Well, they have, and last year was a struggle for them because Lower Sport converted over from Toyota, which they had been a part of Toyota for quite some time, and switched over to Ford. Now, Ford in the last couple of years has not really put a whole lot of engineering support into that series. They've concentrated all their support into the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series. However, with a large enough partner like Thor, there was a lot of groundwork that, they had to build up. They had to build the infrastructure up because it wasn't there in the Truck Series anymore. And there had been a lack of support in the Truck Series from the OEM manufacturer Ford. And that was a position that the company took as a whole, as Toyota and Chevrolet were more dominant into it, so they spent their engineering dollars somewhere else. But, in the year that it took them to build up the infrastructure, I think that they're pretty much back on even keel with where they were when they were being funded with engineering support from Toyota. And I think that's already starting to play out this season already with Johnny Sauter and Matt Crafton being running up there, Grant Enfinger, who at some points have, led the championship standings. And I think overall we're seeing them come back to the Thor sport that we had seen in years past, and they've got some good drivers over there. They brought Johnny Sauter back, like I said, from GMS Racing, where he had been for a couple of seasons, and Matt Crafton has gone out there and competed. Last year I think he struggled too at the same time, and I think his struggles were the fact of they were still trying to build that infrastructure up, and they were trying to get the engineering support, and they were trying to do all of the other things with a conversion into an OEM that hadn't placed any money really any noticeable dollars into that series in quite some time. So as a whole, yes, they are getting better. I mean, we've even seen drivers like, Jesse Little, who he drives a Ford in the series, but he only competes part-time. We've even seen that truck where, that truck is even more competitive this year, whether that's a factor of getting support from either Ford or Thor or whoever the case may be. We are seeing them being more competitive, but, again, the dominance in the truck series continues to be, at least over the last couple of years at Toyota. Now, some of that is subsiding, that we are seeing GMS Racing, who is becoming a powerhouse into it with their affiliates, with, Stuart Friesen and their drivers that they have, Austin Hill, not Austin Hill, but Brett Moffitt and some others. We are seeing Chevrolet becoming more dominant in that sport, or in the truck series too. And I think if Toyota is going to have a tough road ahead of them, as we start seeing some of these more dominant teams come up and crop up and build their teams up with engineering support. Not that Toyota's got to worry about going anywhere, especially with Kyle Busch Motorsports and their affiliate with JGR. But right. I think you are going to continue to see some of these other teams surpass the Toyotas, at least in the short term. But they always seem to make up for it in the long term.
Talking with Steve Wilson, our official NASCAR contributor, editor-in-chief of Speedway Digest, located down in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We move on into Pocono Xfinity Series. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on. And the Xfinity Series going to have to run a split screen today because it's IndyCar in Detroit at 1 o'clock, and it's Pocono Xfinity at 1 o'clock. I tell you what. Life is so cruel to me, Steve, that I have to watch IndyCar and NASCAR at the same time. Actually, probably what will happen is I'll have the NASCAR race on TV and the radio broadcast on the IndyCar. But NASCAR at Pocono, who's going to be in the honeymoon suite in Xfinity? I have to use that pun because A lot of people don't know this about Pocono, but it's a big honeymoon spot. And but I tell you what, in my opinion, it is one of the most beautiful tracks as far as scenery goes on the NASCAR circuit, maybe next to Phoenix. That's a close second. But I tell you what, the mountains of Pocono is awesome to race in.
Well, we already have a Tyler Reddick who won this past weekend at Charlotte in the Xfinity Series race. Is already gonna have to go to the back today. He's sustained some. He's sustained some damage to the car, in which they've had to make some modification to it. It is an impound race, so that means he's going to go back to the back, regardless of where he qualifies today. So I would look. Richard Childress Racing. You look back over the last couple of seasons with them, and while they had Daniel Hemrick in the car last year, Daniel Hemrick never went to victory lane in that car once. And that's something that Richard Childress Racing that we've not seen out of them in quite some time is, they struggled how much they struggled last year with Daniel Hemrick in the car. And even when they were putting Austin Dillon and some of the other drivers into it, it was just really just absent from victory lane, both across NASCAR in general. But they brought Tyler Reddick over from Junior Motorsports, and he started the year off. He won the first race. He just won a couple of weeks ago, and then he just won again at Charlotte. So I think he's a tough driver right now. He is a defending champion from Junior Motorsports of 2018 when he ran for them. I don't think he's just really tough right now. So no matter where he starts, he's going to go to the back. But I think you're going to look for him to come to the front. This is a race where unfortunately we're going to see these cars spread out a lot, and they're going to be multiple seconds apart. There is good racing on the restarts, and there's potential for trouble going into turn one. That's where we see a lot of these incidents happen at Pocono, is on these restarts, or closer to the restarts and green flags going into turn one. There's usually typically a lot of accidents down there. We've had some serious ones over the years down there in turn one. But hopefully this will be a clean race today. It's going to be a hot one out there in Pocono for them. But I just think right now they're really strong. I think Richard Childress Racing is really strong right now, especially with Tyler Reddick in the car.
Steve, let's talk about the Pocono 250, obviously in the mountains of Pocono. Talk with us about that track. It's kind of a unique track. It's different. There's some strategy that has to go on, but it's a fun track to race on. It's certainly one of the older circuits that racing has been happening there. Talk with us about Pocono, the racetrack, and what are the drivers looking at through the turns. And if you're a crew chief of the Xfinity Series or NASCAR Series this weekend at Pocono, what is your strategy?
Well, Pocono is a unique track. There is no turn 4 there. It's a big triangle that they race out on. It's 2.5 miles long.
Turn 4 what? Where's no turn 4?
Yeah, exactly. And, the track is unique in that each of the 3 corners are built with the same, under the same construction, under the same, basically they're built like other tracks. For example, Milwaukee Wall Stadium in New Jersey and Indianapolis Motor Speedway, they've built their 3 turns to mimic those 3 tracks in each of the corners out there. So you get 3 distinct corners that you get 3 different types of racing out onto it. The tunnel turn on the back typically can get very hairy out there. Drivers, just because you got a good car going in turn 1, you may not have a good one going in turn 2. And the crew chiefs and the teams are going to have to work all day long on these cars to keep them pinned to the racetrack and be able to produce the racing without getting into the wall. It's going to be hot. It's going to be slick, like I said, and that that opens up, to tire failures that we've seen in the past out there. These cars will slip and slide a lot of times going through the tunnel turn, back on turn 2. Those slip and slides smack themselves into the wall on these single car incidences. So, there'll just be a lot of work that these cars are going to have to go through and adjust throughout the entire day out there in Pocono.
All right, let's move on to the Monster Energy race. I'm sorry. So let's kind of run a little late on time today, but let's talk a little bit about where we're at as far as Martin Truex Jr. I mean, good run, but hit the wall there last week. So let's just talk about some of these drivers. Let's just kind of go through these standings as we can. But real quickly, what are your thoughts, Martin Truex Jr. going into the Monster Energy race series? And I'm sorry, this is what happens in modern technology. But anyway, Martin Truex Jr. is in first place. That's where I was going, so I'm going with memory. My notes just went blank there, but so I'm back on board here. So that was where I was going with Martin Truex Jr. Obviously, he hits the wall last week in Charlotte there. But what are your thoughts about him this week in Pocono?
I think. Well, Martin Truex Jr. last year was kind of a lame duck year. We just didn't see him as dominant as we had in the past. He's won already 3 times this year in the Cup Series. Somebody asked him this past weekend about the fact of, Martin Truex Jr. had traditionally been very dominant at these 1.5-mile intermediate racetracks, and even since coming over to Joe Gibbs Racing, we haven't necessarily seen that out of him. His response a lot was alluding to the fact of, last year was, kind of one of those years that a transitional year, knowing that the team would be shutting down and then he'd be moving over to Joe Gibbs Racing. And then this year, a lot of it is answer alluded to the fact of, well, these aren't the same type of cars that we've run in the past, with the packages and so forth. So, it's kind of hard to compare sometimes. Is that a driver that has been dominant, like Martin Truex Jr. has been on these 1.5-mile racetracks. Just a couple of years ago at Charlotte, for example, we saw him lead a record high in the Coca-Cola 600, 396 of the 400 scheduled laps into that event. We didn't see him do that this past weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway. And it's really hard right now to compare. And I think a lot of drivers are still, even this far into the season, are still trying to capture what this package can do, what these cars can do, both not only in the intermediate racetracks, which, where the focus has been to try and improve the racing, but how it can improve or how these cars work and handle on some of these even larger tracks. I don't think Martin Truex Jr. is in any danger of anything happening to him. He's already got his 3 wins in. He's solidified himself into the playoffs later this year. To some extent, he can go and just cruise on through the next couple of weeks. We're already halfway through the regular season as it is. But I doubt they're going to do that. I think they're just going to go 100% or even 110% throughout the next couple of weeks to try to gain some more wins. I think he's, Joe Gibbs Racing continues to be dominant. Stewart-Haas Racing, we've seen in the past for Ford. The Ford camp hasn't really been dominant. In fact, Kevin Harvick hasn't been to victory lane except for in a non-points paying race about all the way back in Daytona in February. And, Penske has been riding that train high enough for Ford that, Brad Keselowski, he has 3 wins in the series. So, I think it's being spread out around. We're seeing different drivers now. I'm sure we're talking about big 3 this year, but, again, it's not necessarily the same big 3 as we've talked about in the past. And, yeah, sure, it's Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr., but, we still get some different drivers out there that are going to victory lane. And sometimes, these aren't drivers that we necessarily thought we're going to go to victory lane. But, this season is producing more not only first-time winners in the series, but also more winners outside of 2 or 3 or 4 people than we've seen in the past.
Steve Wilson of Speedway Digest, editor-in-chief of Speedway Digest, our official NASCAR contributor. Steve, we got to wrap it up and put a bow on it before we get on to some other sports talk.